Welcome to The Smart Man, Smarter Woman, a podcast for entrepreneurs by entrepreneurs. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I am Steve Lotz.
And I am Juliet Aurora.
And we are your co-hosts. But before I introduce our very special guest for today's show, let's hear from my wonderful co-host, the smarter woman herself, Juliet. How are you doing today, Juliet? How was your swim this morning?
It was excellent. It was a little on the short side. I slept in a little bit, so it was a little on the short side. But no, it's a great way to start out my morning.
Awesome.
I'm actually really excited about our conversation today. I always love sitting down with young entrepreneurs, and pretty much everybody is young nowadays compared to me, but young entrepreneurs who take one area of business and create several different businesses around this one area. And just the thought process that kind of goes behind that. I'm interested to hear from our guest today as to how that all evolved.
Excellent.
So over to you, Steve, so we can get started.
Okay, well, thank you, Juliet. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning, our podcast is for and about entrepreneurs. Our goal with each episode is hopefully to provide you with some entertainment, but most importantly, value, insights, hopefully some gold nuggets that can help you on your journey wherever you may be on that journey. And today we have a really great show for you. We have a very special guest all the way across the pond, as they say, from the UK. His name is James Mulvany, and he is an entrepreneur that helps brands and other entrepreneurs use audio to grow. And he does it in many ways, including being the founder of radio.co, podcast.co, and matchmaker.fm. And just a quick background, radio.co is a radio station management tool, and I'll let James go into more detail if he would like. Podcast.co is a full-service podcasting platform, including hosting and distribution. And then Matchmaker FM, which is actually where I sort of met James initially, indirectly, which I love his description. It's like Tinder, but for podcasters. And I'm sure we're going to talk about Matchmaker much more during our show today. He also really does sound, as I was reading a little bit on his bio, he does sound very much like our kind of guy. His passions are helping people grow their audiences and businesses. That's awesome. But he loves food. Check. He loves wine. Check. He loves sunshine and cooking. Check, check. And listens to lots of music. So it sounds great. And so without further ado, let's bring our guest into the show, James Mulvany. And welcome, James. And thank you for joining us today from the UK.
Thank you very much, Juliet and Steve, for having me on your show. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. And you've got so many things going on. I didn't really know where to start, but perhaps where we will start is, Could you share a little bit about your own entrepreneurial journey and perhaps how you got where you are right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, being an entrepreneur is kind of something I picked up at a very young age. I, believe it or not, have never, ever worked for anyone else. I've never had a job. So the first thing I did when I finished doing my GCSEs at school was I got a PayPal account on my 16th birthday. And this was like back in 2003. And I just thought, right, okay, what can I do? What skills have I got? How can I make some money? And that was really it. I was off. So the first business, if you like, I ever had was I used to do kind of graphic design, logos, websites. And I used to make those annoying little flashy animated banners that you used to see on websites. So that was really like what I spent my summer holiday just after school doing. And I kind of just caught the bug. And my friends were going out doing part-time jobs or getting paper rounds or working in McDonald's. And I thought, well, I don't really fancy doing that. I'm going to see if I can use this thing in front of me here, the computer, to make some money. And really, that's just the kind of the starting point. Obviously, I then went on to sort of run a few different businesses. I've had successes. I've had failures as well in the last 15 years. Learned a lot along the way, and I think I kind of sort of starting to get there now. I know what I'm doing to some extent, you know. So at the moment, obviously running 3 different services, 3 different products: radio.co, podcast.co, matchmaker.fm. all have got kind of complementary offerings. So there is some crossover in our audiences, but also as well, each of them has their own sort of separate audience too, separate customer base as well. So,
Okay.
And have your businesses, so you started out in the graphic design space
Yeah.
and website, and yes, some of us will remember those flashing animated, some of the people in our audience won't, but the flashing animated banners. But over the years, you've said you've had multiple businesses, both successes and failures. Have they all been kind of in the same industry? Have you kind of found that you've had success in one area versus not as much success in another area?
I mean, yeah, they've been in, certainly, they've all been online ventures. I did run a project called MCR Live, which is kind of a radio/content type service here in Manchester for a couple of years, which ran between 2017 and 19. And we ran that for 2 years. And it, in one way, it was a success. It attracted a big audience. We got lots of people involved with the project. It was really fun to run. But then in some ways it was a failure because it didn't make any money. And it got to a stage where I decided, okay, enough's enough. We've got to call it a day. We tried to, for me, it was all about creating that audience first and creating that buzz. And it was a real passion project. We got probably 50 or so DJs and musicians all involved, creating output for the radio station. And we had a team of contributors who would go out to gigs and write reviews on the gigs and review restaurants and all this sort of thing. So it was a real kind of community-led focused project. But unfortunately, we couldn't find a sponsor that would just cover the bills. And that was my initial target. It was like, I don't really care if we don't make any money from this. It was just meant to be something that would kind of pay for itself. But, unfortunately, after 2 years of trying, we didn't. So, that was one of the sort of failures. But, on the other hand, at the moment, I have radio.co, which has about 5,000 clients all over the world, powering thousands of different radio stations. We have podcast.co, which powers around 2,000 podcasts now, I think, which is only around about a year old. And Matchmaker, we launched this year, and it's grown very quickly I think we're about to hit 5,000 users on that as well. So, that's grown really quickly in a very short space of time. So, I think when you're an entrepreneur, you have to go through sometimes negative experiences. I've had other businesses as well that haven't worked out, products that we've spent money and time investing and building, and they just, they end up just either kind of just fading away, or you end up selling them on, but sometimes you sell them on a loss effectively. I think that's just the nature of what I do. And I think I've accepted that now. I think maybe 10 years ago, when I had a sort of my first, or maybe it was about 8 years ago, I had my first sort of significant failure where I probably spent, north of £100,000 in investing in the product, in terms of when I look at the resource that we devoted to it, and it just wasn't working. And, you take that pretty hard to begin with. But I think nowadays I'm when I have a failure, it's not the end of the world, so to speak.
And I guess, and I don't know what the direction is that Steve want to take this podcast, but I want to spend a couple of minutes, because we don't often hear from entrepreneurs and business owners who are willing to talk about that every business was not a success. Most people
Really?
say, yes, I've had this business and I was successful and I sold it, and then I moved on to this business. And
yeah.
So you don't have a lot of business owners who are willing to be vulnerable and say, hey, I tried something, it didn't work. So if you don't mind, I would like to just talk a little bit about, how did you know that it was time to say, okay, yes, this isn't working, I need to move on to something else?
That's a good question.
Sometimes that's tough.
Yeah, I think, I guess the first question is, how do you measure success? And of course, when you're running a business, as shallow as it sounds, you need to look at the financials. If your business is not making enough money to support itself, and you feel like you've given it a reasonable amount of time, because of course, yes, sometimes you get really lucky and something will take off overnight, and other times you have to work at it sometimes for 2-3 years before you even start breaking even. I think you can kind of see if you're on a trajectory or a path to start getting to that level where you're breaking even, and you've maybe invested X amount of money in building a product. Of course, you're not going to make all that money back to begin with. But, if you're not on that trajectory to kind of start breaking even at some point, and you can't see a clear way of getting out of that sort of trench that you might be in, I think that's probably when you should call it a day. Because, of course, sometimes the problem with businesses is the longer you run them for, the more debt you rack up, or the more you end up investing in them. And that was very much the case with MCR Live, which was the sort of radio and content project which we had here in Manchester. It did serve a good purpose in that we used it as a kind of guinea pig for our radio.co platform. So it was really good for product development and research. And, we learned a lot from it, and we learned a lot of, and also it was a great case study for the platform. But, after 2 years, we'd had several conversations with sponsors, brands. It was alcohol brands or local businesses. And, we'd had kind of interest in sponsorship, which is really how we were going to monetize it, because we had a decent audience. It was about getting sponsorship. But unfortunately, we just couldn't get someone to sign on the dotted line. And, I had sort of 3-4 members of staff who were working full time on that, which is obviously cost quite a bit of money to support it. We had a studio space, which we rented, which obviously cost more money. And I think it got to a stage where eventually, we'd achieved success in that. Yes, we had this audience, and yes, we had lots of people engaged with the project, and it was a real fun project to have. We ran events, etc. But, ultimately you've got to look at the bottom line. And I think that's, as an entrepreneur, if you have like an endless bottomless pit of money, then of course you could just run something like that for years and it would be fine. But I don't. So it was one of these things that was just like, right, okay, enough's enough.
Okay, thank you for sharing.
That's all right. I don't mind. I think it's interesting that you say that a lot of people don't want to talk about failures, because I think for me, I think it's always important to learn from failures, and ultimately every entrepreneur will have successes and will have failures, but you've got to keep trying new things. And, pick yourself up, brush yourself down, and just get on with the next project.
Yeah. Absolutely. No, absolutely. And we're big believers. We never say failures.
No,
it's always successes and learnings.
Yes.
And we have had lots of both, lots of learnings along the way. And one of the great things about being an entrepreneur, it's such a great ride. Speaking from personal experience, but even as you get, reach, my age, which, is certainly older than yourself. It's not that long ago that Juliet and I were involved in a business that we'd been doing for a few years, and we were on the verge of closing it. That it just, it wasn't working as well as we hoped it would. We thought we'd done everything right. We thought we'd, and we both brought lots of experience to it. But even then, we could not get it to work the way it was. And it was only through taking one final step that we hadn't tried before that we were able to finally turn it around, finally get it to where it needed to be. And, many years later, the business is still thriving, won awards and been recognized within our industry. But, people look at that, right, and they go, oh, look at those people. They're so successful, but if they would have had that conversation with us not that many years ago, we were, we had tears dripping in our own glasses of wine, and we were very, very close to shutting it down, probably more close than we care to admit to ourselves sometimes. So it is always a journey. And I believe one of the keys to success for an entrepreneur is knowing when to quit. We have to be, tenacious. We have to be stubborn, but we also have to be wise enough to know, okay, it's time.
Yeah, I think one of the other reasons last year when I decided to wrap up MCR Live was due to the fact that we were about to launch podcast.co. And I do believe as an entrepreneur, you've only got so much kind of mental bandwidth to focus on things. And I think, for me, I like having a few different things on the go, 3 different businesses, different projects. Like, for example, Matchmaker, I'm sure we'll get onto in shortly, but, Matchmaker currently there's no way of monetization on there. It's just a free platform. But, I've got no doubt, and I'm very confident in that service that we will be able to monetize it. And of course, we do get clients from Matchmaker signing up for podcast.co. So there is a kind of benefit to it. But, again, sometimes you have to get momentum with a certain product or service before you can actually sort of start to reap the rewards and benefits.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of Matchmaker, why don't you tell us a little bit about where that came from in your head, and I guess why podcasting?
Absolutely. So, I'll just kind of start by giving a summary. So Matchmaker is a platform to connect podcasters with guests, because About 60% of podcasts are based on interviews and having guests on. And, I've done podcasts in the past, both as a guest and hosted it. And sometimes finding guests is not always that easy, but it's one of these things that if you want to push out content on a regular basis, you've got to make sure you have this constant supply of guests. And sometimes that can be a lot of work. So it really was just came about of, looking at the market. We'd built podcast.co. This was probably about a year ago, sort of last summer. And we were looking at other opportunities. How could we build funnels to drive more traffic onto our website? And one of the ideas we came up with was, let's put up a couple of landing pages, seeing if people are interested in booking guests for their show. And the other landing page was, are you interested in being a guest on more podcasts, on more shows? And before we'd even start writing any code to build the actual platform, we kind of tested this idea with these landing pages. And it was just a simple Google form we had on each. But what we noticed was that people were actually responding. We had people filling out effectively like a profile. So it wasn't just like enter your name and email. It was tell us about yourself. What sort of shows are you interested in? Who would you like to connect with? And people were going to great lengths to actually complete this information. But we had no way of connecting these two lists together. So really that's how the idea for Matchmaker came about. We thought, wouldn't it be great if we could actually connect these two audiences, and we weren't just using it as a way of promoting podcast.co, but we actually had a platform to get these two groups of folks engaged with each other, and also start building valuable relationships between them, and also having us as a byproduct. So because we have the podcast.co logo, a lot of people who are guesting on podcasts end up then starting their own. So it's a sort of a three-way relationship really between the guest, the podcaster, and then also we're there as well. So, that's pretty much how the idea came about. It's currently unmonetized. It's totally free to sign up. I think we will always have a free option. We'll probably have a freemium model moving forward, which we'll probably introduce like towards the end of this year. But really for the last few months, it's just about being able to grow that platform and making sure that users are kind of satisfied and engaged with it. And part of the reason, one of the ways we've done that is just by kind of focusing on quality, really. So, yeah, we've got 5,000 users now, which sounds like a lot, but for the first couple of months, it was a couple of hundred users, and then we sort of worked our way up towards 1,000, and then 2,000, and it's starting to grow at a more rapid pace, I suppose, because of word of mouth as well. But to begin with, it was like we just wanted to make sure that there was good quality guests on there and good quality podcasts, and I think that kind of spurred the conversation between the two user groups.
We will continue with our conversation right after this message from a friend of the show. AIS Solutions is an award-winning cloud accounting firm serving small business all across Canada. If you want to migrate to a powerful and effective paperless accounting system and get your financials wherever you are, whenever you want them, then contact AIS Solutions team of trained professionals today at www.aissolutions.ca. And now, back to our conversation.
One thing I'd like to highlight that you talked about, and I'm not sure if our audience, even paid attention to it, but I think it's very important, is you actually said that when you started Matchmaker and you built out these Google Forms you were testing the market. You didn't even have a product.
Absolutely, yeah.
Whereas most entrepreneurs, and I am 100% guilty of this, will not go out and market anything, sell anything until I have the entire product built in the background. So I think that, you're taking it's so brilliant, and I can completely respect it because I'm not capable of doing it, is putting it out there first to see whether or not anybody wants it before you actually invest any time and money. So I just wanted to call that out in your journey.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the cheapest possible minimum viable product, isn't it? Just two Google Forms, and we probably spent an hour putting them together. And weirdly, this product is growing far quicker than I ever anticipated, and it's really exciting. And there's so many different avenues we can go down now. We don't necessarily have to stick to podcasting. We could kind of go down the influencer route. We could be connecting podcasters with brands and advertisers. So there's lots and lots of opportunities that we've kind of identified of where we could go with this. But for now, it's been just focusing on this kind of one core thing of connecting podcasters and guests. But yeah, it's one of these things. I'm guilty of that as well in the past, of just assuming that there's a demand for something, or you think you know better because it's your idea, so it's going to be great, right? And then you sometimes invest a lot of time or money building something, and ultimately it might not work. And then either your options are you try and pivot or try and create something else, or you just have to move on and try something new. But it's probably the first time I've done that on a true basis, where we've literally had like a really scaled down MVP just to test the market. But I must admit, it's worked. I think I will be trying this again in future. And again, it's one of these things you hear people talking about and you think, I know better. But actually, sometimes it's good to listen to other people and their experiences as well.
And I think also that by going this route where you haven't invested a ton of money, you haven't built, spent 6 months or 8 months building out a product, or years building out a product before you take it to market, you also, I guess, have less emotion invested in it, that if it isn't working, for you to pivot and shut it down. Whereas if you spent 2 years of your life just getting ready to launch, you're going to hang on to it a lot longer, even if it's not successful.
Yeah. And the other benefit as well was, we had a list of probably 150 odd people who were our first users, that they were ready and waiting to sign up. We knew that there was that intention there. They were looking for a product like this, even though, we kind of lied a little bit saying that this was a product that wasn't really in existence at the time. Straight away, when you do launch, you can say, look, go and check it out, create your profile. And I think actually maybe what we did was we actually took that information and created their profiles on behalf of them, just so we had our kind of first core group of users already. Because again, this is what the problem with building a community like Matchmaker. No one wants to sign up to a ghost town. Right. And, if there's unless there's a great selection of guests on the platform, then podcasters aren't likely to sign up, and vice versa. So that was kind of one of the challenges as well, which we thought when we brought it to market in February, we wanted to make sure that there was, we were going to be able to grow both sides of the platform, both podcasts and guests. But we had to kind of try and be careful to begin with, that we weren't, people weren't signing up and just being like, this is rubbish. There's no one on this platform. So yeah, it was really useful having that initial sort of group of people that we can market and sort of get on board.
Well, that's great. And I should just mention too that the website is matchmaker.fm.
Yep.
So for anyone who is interested, we joined and have been very, very happy with it. It's worked very well for us. We're a relatively new podcast. So for us, we very much, we have lots of contacts within our own industry, but we very much wanted to reach out and find people outside of our industry to share their knowledge. And it's been a great platform for that. One question I'd love to ask, and not to put you on the spot here, but with, entrepreneurs, when they're growing their business and marketing their business, they have so many channels and so many avenues open to them that they can, follow along or go in that direction. Mm-hmm. What would you say to them as to why you believe podcasting should be part of their marketing, from your perspective?
Absolutely. Good question. I think a couple of points to make. Firstly, if you're not ready to go fully and start your own podcast to begin with, appearing as a guest or an expert on other podcasts is a great way to kind of dip your toes and see if it's for you. I think the power of podcasting is that you have the user's attention. Now, if you look at other platforms, so for example, if you're talking about doing video marketing on Facebook or YouTube, generally speaking, people watch those kind of videos between 30 seconds and a minute. And it's proven that if you get someone listening to a podcast episode, 70% of people will actually listen for the entire episode, which, can be 20, 30 minutes. Now, as marketers and business people, there's no other platform really online, I don't think anyway, where you have people's attention for that amount of time. So it's really, really powerful to build that rapport with your audience. And also as well, I think, I've just come off this podcast tour where I did 30 podcasts in 30 days. And as an entrepreneur, you have some great conversations too. It's fantastic interviewing people, if you're sat like you guys are today on the other side of the fence and learning from guests you have on. But as well as a guest, it's just really, really liberating being able to meet some really interesting people. And of course, the other benefit of doing a podcast like this where you have guests on is that every guest you interview generally will share it with their audience too. So it's a good way of, spreading the word about your business. But then again, if you're guesting on other people's podcasts, you're pushing yourself in front of audiences who perhaps wouldn't have had exposure to you or your product or service. So I think it's a win-win situation, and it's just great fun as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I'm a big believer in podcasts.
Yeah.
I mean, the other thing that I think is very important for podcasting going forward is that it's all about consuming content, and podcasting you can consume anywhere, right? I mean, if you're working out at the gym, you're driving in your car, you can't watch videos.
Yes.
Well, you shouldn't be watching videos while you're driving your car. And so it gives people much more flexibility, as well as, like you say, that, generally they stick with it longer. So there's an opportunity to perhaps learn more, but they can consume it, really anywhere. I've been wanting to have a podcast for a number of years, and I can see Juliet, cringing a little there. She was a tough sell on this because I in my own head, I very much had an idea of how I wanted to do this, that I thought it needed to be both of us as co-hosts because we come from different perspectives, different backgrounds. And I thought it would bring much more to it than if it was just me as the host of a podcast. But she fought me on it for, I'm going to say 3 years, maybe even a little bit longer than that.
Wow, okay.
Definitely 3 years.
But then when I came up with this name, Smart Man, Smarter Woman, for some reason, she seemed really excited about podcasting.
You keep
and so
saying that, but that is not true. It was not that.
But it does make a good story, though, Juliet. You have to admit.
But it makes it sound really shallow sometimes, which is
anyway. The important thing is we're here now, right? So, and we're I think we're enjoying it. It's been great meeting lots of very interesting people. You mentioned your tour, which I thought was quite fascinating. Was there a specific reason why you wanted to try and do 30 podcasts in 30 days? Was it just so you could say, to see if it could be done, or what was the rationale behind that?
Yeah, firstly, I think it just sounds cool. I wanted to really test Matchmaker out. As the founder, I obviously architected and built this platform with my team, obviously, and we had launched it. I could see customers were getting involved and giving us good feedback, and I've made connections, and I really just wanted to try this for myself. Plus, also, it was a good bit of marketing content because I can then push this story out and teach others how this is possible and how to be organized about it, how you can approach it, writing a pitch to appeal to different types of people, and again, how to actually sort of filter down what sort of podcast you want to appear on, because of course there are podcasts on every subject imaginable. Obviously, we're quite heavy on business and marketing and sales and personal development style podcasts on the platform, but there's ones about sports, science, anything you can possibly imagine, and of course there's an expert to match. So we're really trying to sort of broaden horizons there. But the tour has just seemed like a logical next step. We'd spent the kind of first couple of months, sort of February, March, and then April, kind of building out the audience. So I thought, let's just try this out. Obviously as a founder, it's really good to get hands-on experience using the platform. And of course, one of the byproducts of doing this is that I've been able to tell lots and lots of people about Matchmaker as well.
Absolutely. No, I mean, I personally think it was a great idea, quite brilliant, and I'm sure it's going to do very well for you.
Okay, so Steve, just don't get any ideas about us doing 30 podcasts in 30 days.
It's a lot of work. It was one of these things, some days you'd have 4 lined up and you'd have maybe an hour or half an hour gap between each of them. So really that day had to be devoted just to doing podcasts, which, is fine. And I think actually I would not normally be able to do this if I wasn't in lockdown, because if I'm in the office, I just don't think I'd have the time to devote to it. Too many people coming up to me and asking questions, etc. So it seemed like a good time to do it as well. But I certainly think we've finished the 30, and I'm still doing like 3-4 a week anyway, just because I think I've caught the bug of it really. And of course there are quite a few that were rescheduled, etc. So there's no reason really to sort of slow down. If you can manage doing 1 or 2 a week, it's fantastic.
Yeah, and that's certainly what we try to do. Although I guess we haven't been guests yet. We haven't been asked.
Right.
But,
okay.
We'll.
Is that a really
No. We're working on it. I know when I say that, Juliet just cringes and goes, one more thing for us to do. Where are we going to find the time? But you make the time. So I'd like to also, you've accomplished a lot in a relatively short period of time. Where would you like to see yourself 5 years from now?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm not sure the answer to that. I think, I've never, one of the things I've never done is I've never had really much time off. Since I sort of was turned 16, 17, I've just worked for my entire adult career. I'm just turned 33 now. So I've been working like nonstop for 15 years. I never got to do the whole traveling thing. I never went around the world. So I think at some point within the next 5 years, I'd either like to be at a stage where I can just either maybe sell one of the companies and go and take a back seat and go and do something like that, or even just get to a point where, I can potentially just take a step away for a year or two and have some time out. But, it's been an interesting journey. And I think, I'm still very much focused on growth. I'm still very kind of hungry to try and achieve more. I think part of that won't ever leave me. I think it's one of the things that a lot of successful people have is that, in a sense, you're kind of never happy and you're never satisfied and you always want more. So yeah, well, but that's kind of where I see myself in 5 years. Well, hopefully on a beach somewhere.
Awesome. A beach is a great place to be. I can tell you that Juliet and I have probably made some of our best decisions laying on a beach. So highly recommended for sure.
Definitely.
Is there any interest in writing a book?
Yeah, I mean, I've written, there is a book I have called Read This If You Want to Start a Podcast, which is kind of like a step-by-step guide. I'll hold my hands up. I didn't actually write it all myself. We was a sort of team effort. Do I think I'd write a book? Potentially. One day. I don't know if it's something that I would necessarily do right away. And again, it depends what the book would be about. I don't know if I'd... the thing is, I think there's lots and lots of business books now. Everyone is a Amazon best-selling author.
Yes.
So yeah, maybe potentially.
Well, we've written a book, but we are not Amazon best-selling authors. So and our book was really just we wrote. I guess it was about a 5 or 6 year time frame, as I mentioned earlier in the podcast, where we start the book where we're thinking strongly of closing the business, and then it's sort of the journey that took us from there. Anyway, so it's basically an entrepreneurial journey. Yeah. It's pretty honest. We share lots of learnings in that book, but it's hard work writing a book. But it can also be very rewarding at the end of it when you have people come to you who've read it and say thank you very much for writing that. And I think that I think was the great thing about it. I think that brings us to the part of the show where we ask some questions. And this is where I thank Mr. James Lipton from Actors Studio. Don't want to ever be accused of borrowing this without giving credit. And this is where, for those regular listeners of our podcast, we have our questions that we ask every guest. And so are you ready, James?
I am. I'm always rubbish at these quick fire rounds, but I'll give it my best shot.
You will be awesome. I know you will. So the first question is, what one word best defines an entrepreneur?
Oh, that's a tricky one. I think perseverance.
Good answer.
Yeah.
What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
When I was sort of 15, 16, I was training to be a cabinet maker. So I'd go back to that. In a heartbeat. I just think it was reserved for a hobby rather than a career. So, but yeah, I loved making furniture and woodworking. That would be my choice. That's going to be my retirement plan, I think.
Awesome. That's quite different from what you're doing.
Yeah.
What profession would you like never to attempt?
Something that was really like an accountant. I know you guys are accountants, aren't you? But I don't think I'd ever be a good accountant. So
okay, perfect. And I think Juliet pleads guilty, but I'm innocent on that particular charge.
It makes the world go round.
Yeah.
For sure. Okay, next question. What sound or noise do you love?
I love birdsong. just when I'm in the countryside, just listening to the birds. I think that's amazing.
Awesome. What book would you recommend that every entrepreneur should read?
It's quite hard to just narrow it down to one book. I think one book that I read, which, well, there's a couple of books, they're quite cliche, everyone talks about them, but I remember reading Rich Dad Poor Dad about 10 years ago, and that kind of, I think, opened my eyes up to not just how to make money, but then once you've actually got some money, what to do with it. So the idea of investing, property and stuff like that was really useful to learn. And also I remember reading Tim Ferriss, 4-Hour Work Week, probably again about 10 years ago, and that was again a big eye opener for me. I think it's maybe a bit of a ideal point of view. Oh, you can sit on a beach and work from your laptop. Doesn't always work out like that, but it was good to read anyway.
Yeah, no, it's an entertaining book. And our last question: when your own entrepreneurial journey is completed, what do you hope your legacy is?
Well, I like to think that we've created products that have changed people's lives for the better. They've got some kind of use out of them, and I think that's always a good legacy to leave behind, and hopefully products that have longevity as well. Like, you hear about companies that get bought out and then they just sort of squash them into the or just gets absorbed into some big corporation. I really hope that by that time, one of our products has got its own can stand on its own 2 feet, and it's not just absorbed into some corporation and just becomes sort of a thing of the past. Excellent.
And if any of our listeners want to reach out and connect with you, James, what's the best way? And I'll spell the name. James, I think most people can get that one. Mulvany, Mulvany. Where can they get in touch?
So I'm on all the social media channels. For this very reason, I have jamesm.com/connect, which is easy. jamesm.com/connect. That has got a list of all my social media links on there. And I'm constantly pushing out content on YouTube and LinkedIn about broadcasting and podcasting and being an entrepreneur and all that good stuff.
Awesome. And before we conclude this episode, which has been great, really enjoyed it, do you have any final thoughts for our audience, James?
I think, if I might as well give another shameless plug to Matchmaker. If you're interested in thinking about starting a podcast, head to podcast.co. If you're interested in booking guests for your show, or you want to become a guest, you think you've got an area of expertise that you want to share, or a story to tell, go and check out matchmaker.fm.
Awesome. Thank you. And what about you, Juliet? You've got any final thoughts before we close out the show?
I always have final thoughts, but I'll keep it short. I think that one of the things that I got out of this episode, more than anything else, was, again, going back to that minimum viable product, trying something and seeing if there's interest and demand for the product before you actually invest a lot of time in it. And I appreciate your honesty in wanting to talk in sharing with our audience some of the things that didn't work and why you moved on to the next thing. So thank you very much, James. It was an enlightening half an hour spent with you. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me on. Appreciate your time, and it's been a pleasure to talk to you both.
Well, and it's been our pleasure. There's lots and lots of great stuff there. And I also get the feeling there's lots and lots of stuff we didn't even touch on. So who knows, maybe we'll get together again in the future. So let's close out now with our quote, as we do, for those of you who know me as the quote nerd. We have to have a quote to finish. So here it is. 20 years from now, you will be more disappointed by the things you didn't do than by the ones you did do. So throw off the bowlines, sail away from the safe harbor, catch the trade winds in your sails, explore, dream, discover. Mark Twain. I think that's appropriate for our conversation today.
A fantastic quote.
Thank you again, James. Thank you, Juliet, my awesome co-host. Couldn't do this without you. But most importantly, thank you to you, our audience, for tuning in and giving us a listen. We sincerely hope you found some value. If you did, please subscribe. You can find us in all the normal places, iTunes, Spotify, Google, you name it. Or you can visit our website, smartmansmarterwoman.com. So thank you very much. Until next time, take good care of yourself and those you love. Bye for now.